I don't know about you, but I've become aware recently of how the witness of women encircles the gospel story. The key moments of Jesus' birth, death, and resurrection are all recorded through the eyes of women. And their presence at these events is both unexpected as well as prophetic of a world that is about to turn. Today's reading of the Annunciation to Mary opens up this narrative by describing how God would work great things in the life of an unpretentious young woman from an often disdained part of Galilee. So Luke's record of the Annunciation is set in a radical and unexpected context. Forget the beautiful and hushed scenarios of Fra Angelico or Botticelli. There's no meek virgin here dressed in fancy brocades or with a gold leaf crown in the picture. You see, Luke deliberately structures this narrative of the Annunciation within the framework of the call and commissioning of a major prophet. This configuration would have been very familiar to his original readers, as it harks back to the same structure of the call of Abraham or Moses and many of the other prophets who came after them. First, there is an opening scenario. A startling messenger or messengers from heaven enter the scene. In Moses' case, he comes upon a burning bush, which terrifies him. Then a voice announces a call to a new life and an invitation to leadership. In Genesis 17, Abraham is told by God that Sarah will bear him a son. And Moses is told that God will accompany him to Egypt to deliver the people from slavery. Each of them reacts to the message with disbelief or dismay or even derision. Then Abraham fell on his face, we are told, and laughed. And he said to himself, "How can Sarah, who is nearly 90 years old, bear a child to a man who is 100? What kind of message is this?" Moses responds to God, "But who am I to go to Pharaoh? And what if the people don't believe me and refuse to listen to me?" But then comes a reassurance of divine power. "I will accompany you," says God to Moses. "I will bless Sarah and give you both a son," says God to Abraham. And so to Mary. As Mary heard the news that she was to bear a child, Luke tells us, she was very much perplexed by the angel's words and wondered what sort of message this could be. "How can I conceive a child without the aid of a man?" asks Mary. "The Spirit of God will overshadow you, and the power of the Most High will be with you," says Gabriel in response. So Mary's prophetic ancestry stands in a direct line from Abraham and Moses and many others. Just as with their heavenly visitors, Mary was asked for and gave her consent to a mission, but only after she had ascertained its full dimensions. And her response was given freely, without any deference or consultation with her family or her betrothed. In this momentous encounter with the angel, Mary's free consent and her faith and courage makes possible the entrance of God into human flesh and human history. As a result, she is overshadowed by the Spirit, and the offspring of the Most High takes human form within her. This Spirit who overshadowed and moved the waters of Mary's womb is the same Spirit who, in the very first verse of the first chapter of Genesis, glides over the waters of the deep and brings forth an abundance of life. And now, with Mary's consent, this Spirit begins to co-create once again. After this, Mary, pregnant with the Holy, sets out to proclaim the good news to her cousin Elizabeth. Mary set out, says Luke, and went with haste into the full country of Judea to see her cousin Elizabeth. Now it's a strenuous journey over the hills to Judah, and it was perhaps accompanied, in Mary's case, by bouts of morning sickness along the way. Mary's journey, like the journeys of Abraham and Moses when they set out after their call and commissioning, is risky and unpredictable. And then, in the company of Elizabeth, Mary breaks forth into the Magnificat, one of the most sublime texts of the whole of Scripture. In pursuing God's call throughout her life, Mary will in future journey to Bethlehem, to Egypt, to Jerusalem, and eventually to Calvary, where she will wrap the broken body of her child in cloths for his burial, just as she would wind swaddling clothes around the newborn in the manger. And then Mary, too, is at the center of the community when the Spirit descends once again at Pentecost. So Mary, in the words of John of the Cross that we have just read, Mary now comes walking down the road, pregnant with the Holy. And this Mary, pregnant with new life, knocks on the doors of the hearts of each one of us, once again seeking shelter for the birth. And so each year at Christmastide, under the roof of our souls, the divine comes to birth again. There, under the roof of our being, we midwife the new creation into being, as God once again grasps onto our arms for help. In this strange and solitary and sometimes scary Advent season of 2020, God within Mary is searching for open, courageous hearts and arms that will help to turn the world around again. As I look back on the past couple of years, it strikes me that so many of the willing midwives of the new birth are young women again, just like Mary. Shining a light in the dark world, they are heralds of disintegration, but also rebirth. The voices of young women, for so long silenced by the confines of convention, are finally being heard again. Listen to one of these unmuted Madonnas. Autumn Peltier, the young Anishinaabeg water woman from Wikwemicom, Ontario, said this at the United Nations in 2018. "We can't drink money or drink oil. Canada is not a third world country, but here in this country of mine, Indigenous people live in third world conditions." A year later came Greta Thunberg, sailing on a risky voyage over the Atlantic, the mighty wind of the Spirit filling her sails and urging her on in haste over the waves. Docked safely in New York, Greta addressed the United Nations Climate Change Forum with these words: "How dare you? How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words." Like Mary, these fearless modern day Madonnas, and there are many more of them who could be named, they travel heavily laden, pregnant with the fears and hopes of future generations gestating within them. Can they count on help from our outstretched arms to help midwife the new creation? In this final week of Advent 2020, can the pregnant Mary take shelter under a roof that each one of us can provide? Maybe Mary will give birth in a tent. Maybe Mary will give birth in a shelter or in a lockdown storefront. Certainly, she will knock at the door of the hearts of each one of us. As John of the Cross wrote, "If you want, Mary will come walking down the road, pregnant with the holy, and say, 'I need shelter for the night. Please take me inside your heart. My time is so close.' Then, under the roof of your soul, you will witness the sublime intimacy, the divine, the Christ, taking birth forever. As Mary grasps your hand for help, for each one of us is the midwife of God, each one. So may we all midwife the Christ who will be born this Christmas into a rebirth that will turn the world around. So be it.